updates. More than half of passengers on at least 2 flights from China to Italy have tested positive for COVID-19. This comes as China prepared to open up its borders and lift the restrictions under its stringent zero-COVID policy. Despite that, the country faces a massive uptick of new infections. The 2 flights into Milan were amongst those wherein the passengers were subjected to new mandatory COVID-19 testing. Millions of Chinese are flying abroad for next month's Lunar New Year holiday for the first time since 2020 in almost 3 years. Meanwhile, China has eased travel restrictions. It is set to resume issuing regular visas, passports to relax COVID curbs. China to also lift quarantine requirements for inbound travelers. Is China now trying to play its COVID atom bomb for the second time? Is China deliberately trying to reinfect the world is the big question. Joining us at this point is Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman, Nephron Clinic. We also have Dr. PSV Rao, Consultant Surgeon, Manipal Hospital, Hebal, Bengaluru. Joining us live, Colonel J.S. Suri, Foreign Affairs Expert, is also live with us. Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, is joining us live as well. Dr. Bagai, let me begin with you first. Many questions being asked over what really is China doing to control the latest surge?
Good afternoon. I think China is living up to its notorious reputations of being a dragon. I think they are obviously a completely irresponsible state, intellectual atrophy, and complete moral bankruptcy. You can't have this infection spreading all over again. If we remember and jog our memories back in early part of 2020, when the virus in fact had started in December or even early of 2019, a lot of Chinese labor was traveling into Italy and other parts of the European Union, and the infection spread. There are a couple of important points which come out of this. Is China testing its passengers before they board an international flight? If no, they are even more irresponsible. If they are, and more than 50% of the passengers are turning out to be positive, it only portrays how poor their medical and testing facilities is, their diagnostic facilities. Point number 2 is, I think overall, all flights in and out of China should be banned and internationally. I think that entire zone of China as a country should become an isolation or a quarantine. They have to be isolated to begin with medically as far as travel is concerned. If this infection spirals out of hand, and mind you, we have more than 650 sublineages of Omicron, and especially the ones which are now being seen as BF.7 and XBB 1.5, they are notorious for evading the body immunity, both neutralizing antibodies and vaccine-induced immunity. This is going to be very dangerous for the world, and I think China is obviously not going to toe the line, and I think the Riot Act needs to be read out to China. Over to you.
Let me take that straight across to Dr. PSV Rao as well. Dr. PSV Rao, the big question is Xi Jinping trying to reinfect the world? Already there are many questions over, the origins of COVID and what China really did to stop it in the first place. And now with this latest surge, is Xi trying to reinfect the entire world? What is China doing? Infections are growing with each passing day by magnitude numbers, and yet they're further easing restrictions.
Good afternoon, Uday, and to all your viewers. This has been very obvious that they are very irresponsible and they just couldn't care. And the sort of attitude that if we are going to suffer, let the rest of the world suffer, let the rest of the world's economy get hit. And this is why 3 years ago and now, since last 1 week, I have been repeatedly saying that all the nations should come together and declare China a confinement zone and not allow any kind of travel, air, ship, land, everything should be closed. I mean, when you declare a particular area a confinement zone, that is basically what you do. And no trade, no import, export, no people coming in and out, no animals being let in and out, nothing. Completely closed, shut it down. China, that is the only language this Chinese government will understand. They are being highly irresponsible. They have been irresponsible with their own people, and they are being irresponsible for the whole world. There is no doubt about it. And this is why I have been repeatedly saying, it should be the world, at least now, after 3 years, when the whole thing is being repeated. And remember, the Chinese New Year is coming soon. And already all the Chinese are bolting, like when in a school, when the bell is rung and the class is over, you see everyone bolting out. Just like that, they are bolting out, and the Chinese are intentionally increase the number of passports being issued. They are increasing the number of flights. They are encouraging all these people to leave. And they just like Dr. Sanjeev Bagai said, their testing is obviously not up to the mark. And remember, last time, 3 years ago, we blocked the Chinese flights. Instead, the virus came through Milan and Italy and Europe. Milan is the fashion center of Italy. They get all their apparels stitched in China. So the first export to Europe occurred in Milan 3 years ago. And it is the same story now being repeated. I think at least now all of us should wake up and completely block Chinese flights, Chinese ships, everything. The airspace, the sea lanes, everything should be blocked. Over to you.
Colonel J. Sodhi, let me quickly draw you in here on what really is transpiring in China and what their modus operandi is to deal with this latest surge, or have they just given up?
Jan Uday, it's my honor to be on a news channel and a privilege to be with the esteemed co-panelists. At a time when the curbs and controls in China should be the strictest, in view of the COVID-19 volcano that has erupted once again in China, the China government's decision to allow its citizens to travel freely globally is highly irresponsible and ill-considered. Till date, we have lost 6.85 million people to this COVID-19 ever since it started in end 2019. I don't know, when will the moral conscience of China wake up? How many more million deaths will they see before they finally, control this from the country, which is also the originator of this Wuhan virus or the China virus, as the former US President Donald Trump rightly called it. Well, we all know that China is the culprit nation, but we can't, overlook the other countries also. The whole world knows, Uday, that the COVID-19 started from China in end 2019. In 2021, that is last year, the global trade with China was 6.05 trillion US dollars, up 30% from 2020. This shows that China has got so deep pockets that the whole world is helpless. Not even superpowers like Russia and USA can do anything. As it is, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, all are defunct. This is a very scary situation. We are once again, seeing what was happening in 2020 when COVID finally struck the whole world, and China, by its inactions, is again putting the humanity to risk.
All right, Professor Madhav Nalapath, let me in fact get you back in here as well, Professor Nalapath, on of course, the alarm bells which are ringing, of course, looking at the cases in China, but now with them refusing to, tell us their daily numbers, the fact that obviously more than half of passengers on at least 2 flights to Italy from China testing positive, showing us the positivity rate within China, the situation there. Despite this, though, more and more flyers are being allowed to leave and go to different parts of the world.
Uday, let me point out that I don't believe 50% of the population in China has got COVID. It can't be that high a figure. It may be 20%, 30%, not 50%. Well, it may not, this kind of a figure is indicative only of a fact that whatever, if assuming there is an RT-PCR test before departure, that particular test is not worth the paper that or that it gets printed on. It's a worthless test. And go back to 2020. In 2020, first the Chinese denied that there was any virus. Then they denied it was a severe virus. Then they said there's no problem in travel. And the WHO, of course, stood with them every inch of the way. Every inch of the way, the WHO failed the world. It's not the World Health Organization. It seems to be a very much very different organization in terms of the single country that and single party that is looking after. I want to point out very clearly that in 2020, flights came from China all across the world and spread this contagion all across the world. We are the same leadership in a much stronger way is in power in China. The same leadership that covered up COVID, that covered up the Wuhan laboratory, the same leadership with its deep pockets that has got its agents of influence across the world. And already what are we seeing? We are seeing professors, we are seeing think tank experts, we are seeing scholars, all of whom have linkages. You look at their travel, look at their bank accounts, you will see the linkages in one way or the other, saying, my God, these kind of bans are ridiculous. They make no sense. Where have you heard that before? Back in the early 2020s, we have heard that before. The reality is, as Dr. Bagai and has correctly said, that it is a strain that we are not sure will have the effect. One thing is very clear, and that is that the Chinese are using all the propaganda machinery that they control across the world to convey the message it's safe to accept visitors from China without any testing. And some countries have taken them seriously. The UK, still no testing of passengers from China. The US, if I'm not mistaken, within 2 days you must have a test. How many people can you infect in 2 days? So the reality is, this time at least, if the world doesn't wake up, I can only say that it is a tremendous sense of, if I may say so, a tremendous sense of disgust at policymakers in key countries. I'm very sure that India is going to insist on not just an RT-PCR in some Chinese airport, which can be faked. And even these passports, once you get COVID, maybe that's a passport to a passport in China, and including a ticket to go abroad. So the point is, they have to be tested immediately on arrival, and we have to be extremely cautious. It's not the fault of Chinese people, it's the fault of the Chinese system, which is non-transparent and doesn't care for anybody or anything except its own survival. The Communist Party of China, not the people of China, the Communist Party of China and its leadership are only concerned for their own survival. And may I end by saying, Uday, their view is, if there is a plague, let the whole world have this plague, and then there'll be a level playing field. That happened in 2020, it must not be allowed to happen again.
Absolutely. Let me, go back across then at this point to Dr. Sanjeev Bagai. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, how must international countries respond to this? How should the rest of the world respond if China is not serious about clamping down, if China is not serious about imposing restrictions? How should the world respond?
Yeah, I think this entire episode leaves a very sour taste in the mouth as far as the international leadership is concerned. The role of WHO and other designated world health and administrative bodies is concerned. A lot is left lacking. The real concern is that we don't know the exact numbers coming out of China. We don't know the genomic sequence because they've stopped it. We don't know the case fatality. We don't know which patient is carrying what kind of viral load. And these people are coming out. As far as response is concerned, I think it should be not only a graded but a very aggressive response. All flights coming out of China should be debarred from landing in any international airport. I think we need some sort of moral integrity as far as the world is concerned. Point number two is, as far as China is concerned, they cannot live a life in isolation. At the present moment, they've been doing this, what is called in Hindi as dadagiri, and getting away from it. But I think the bluff has been called out and twice over. And I think the world has had enough. It's only a question of reaching a tipping time or a tipping moment where 5 or 6 major countries of the world will gather their moral integrity together. And I'm quite sure India can take the lead. I don't believe that China cannot be cowed down. I don't believe that China will continue to dominate. I don't believe that China will be still a superpower, so to say. I think the downfall of China has started. We just need to aid it.
Okay, let me in fact also take that across to Dr. PSV Rao. Dr. PSV Rao, obviously we cannot expect anything from the Chinese. I think people have given up. But what can the rest of the world do, and what should they do immediately?
We need to save ourselves. I mean, this is now, as you saw 3 years ago, if we remain lenient, we were the first to block Chinese flights, but the virus came to us through Italy, Europe, and through the Middle East. So we have to be doubly sure. Number one, India has to protect itself. We can't depend on others. Second, neither on the others or nor for WHO for any directives. The WHO is, if you notice, totally silent. They are not saying anything at all about travel restrictions or about any other issues on this. And they are not even commenting on the fact that China has stopped giving them figures. China first said, we are not going to give figures to WHO. Then they said, we are not going to do any testing. Then they said, we are not going to issue any official figures. Still, everyone is silent. I think the whole world seems to have just given up, and you can't give up on this issue. It is a life and death issue, and we need to be very careful. So India needs to be very strict with these travel restrictions, because even if we block Chinese flights, Chinese can come through, or the virus itself can come through various other nations. So travel restrictions are number one priority for India now. Not only that, we need to reach out to all other nations in the world, saying that why not we consider a complete ban on people traveling out of China for the time being, unless because anyway, like Dr. Bagai said, that they are very opaque, and we don't know what if they are doing tests, not doing tests, what is the quality of the test, what are their figures. Nothing is nothing, we can't trust them at all. So I think we have to be both on our own and try and get the world with us in blocking this travel to the spread of this virus. Actually, it looks as if intentionally they are trying to spread the virus like they did last time. 3 years ago, they blocked all travel inside China, but encouraged Chinese during the New Year to travel back to the rest of the world and carry the virus. So they are busy exporting the virus once again, and whatever varieties they have of the new strains. I think travel restriction is where we have to be very important. Plus, we have to, as we are doing already, sprucing up our entire mechanism and getting it ready in case the virus starts a surge of cases in India. Oxygen supply, ICU, everything is being spruced up, the drug supplies, etc. And as you know, Indian drugs are already being smuggled into China. And I have received requests from my own friends, Chinese friends in Hong Kong and in Southeast Asia, requesting for antiviral drugs. This is true. People are saying that the media is hyping. Media is not hyping. There is a severe shortage of drugs, of antiviral drugs in China. There's no question about it.
That is the situation on ground, but the fear is, Colonel Sodhi, that is going to be repeated in other countries as well. China is obviously failing to clamp down, is failing to rein in the situation. Some people are saying perhaps they're doing that deliberately again, unleashing this COVID atom bomb upon the world. But, surely countries must act before this situation is replicated in other parts of the world.
Definitely, Uday. China can't be trusted for anything because their each and every action is circumspect. And it has been proved over time that they are just not trustworthy. The World Health Organization has approved 9 COVID-19 vaccines for China, which is the highest for any nation. And with just 12 to 20% efficacy, now we are staring at a tsunami of COVID-19 cases in China, and the Chinese government's failure to prevent its citizens from spreading the disease globally again has once again put each one of us, you and me, at risk. And this risk is going to get fiercer with each passing day as more and more Chinese travel outside the country to the other nations in the world. Well, it's high time. We all know that WHO is defunct. United Nations has done nothing. Each and every country has to now stand up and step up their measures against China. The first important step should be all flights to and from China should be banned with immediate effect. This one big move will control COVID-19 to a great extent. And the other is that all the cargoes coming should be thoroughly sanitized, even if they remain in the ports for 2, 3, 4 days, doesn't matter. Now, money is not important. What is important is saving each and every life. As it is, we have lost so many in the last 3 years just due to one country, and that is China.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, come in here. You were also expressing shock, indignation at the fact that, the world is not acting as they should. Are they waiting for China to clamp down? Is that asking too much? Have people not learnt their lessons?
Uday, I want to point out the obvious fact, which has been mentioned by one of the panelists. When you have deep pockets, you can buy individuals. Now, you're seen, for example, in some leading television channels in the Western world, the same channels that are basically turbocharging this proxy war on Russia. At the same time, so conveniently for China, they're turbocharging that particular war and NATO backing for it. The same channels are now having quote unquote experts. And these experts are saying, well, bans are no use. I saw a leading international channel in which a top expert was talking to an anchor, and that anchor, he was saying bans are no use at all. There's no point. It's not needed. It's not needed. What are you saying? The reality of the situation is that we don't know what the labs in China will come up with. We don't know what the plans in China are. And let me point out one thing to you, Uday, as someone who has done a little bit of study about the Chinese leadership over decades. The Chinese leadership calculates its successes in terms of the other countries, in terms of the failure of other countries. They calculated looking at the relative position of China vis-a-vis other countries. So if China is having a horrible situation on COVID, well, the major countries that are competing with China in the great power stakes, in the major power stakes, they should have a super horrible situation on COVID. That they did in 2020. They did that in 2020. Number one. Number two, if China is unsafe for manufacturing because of a virus, every other country that is capable of manufacturing, and here India comes in. India is the obvious target. So I would be very, very careful about the efforts of the Communist Party of China. Again, not the Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party leadership to create problems in India, because their biggest fear is that India will be friendly with the United States, friendly with the Western countries, and that India will then become the repository of all the companies, of all the manufacturing that is now fleeing China for reasons that are obvious to all of us who are watching, for example, NewsX channel.
Okay, let me quickly also go back to Dr. Bagai and also get in a view, Dr. Bagai, on where this situation is headed. What do the next 6 weeks look like, in your opinion?
So I think focusing and concentrating just on the Indian welfare and Indian safety, I think we need to ramp up the boosters. Only about 26 to 30% of the eligible population have taken the third dose. I must add, and it's extremely important, that the remaining people who have not taken it, it will be only partially useful, but useful all the same, because it was made against the original strain. What we have seen, the new sublineages have shown more than 100-fold evasion of antibodies and immunity, both towards past natural infection and towards vaccine-induced immunity. The intranasal vaccine will become an ideal counterfoil. It's easy to give, it's economical, it's with practically no side effects, and gives excellent nasal local immunity to the respiratory tract. And last, most importantly, is travel surveillance and travel guidelines. I think this advisory is a must. We must focus on it, make sure that our borders are safe for all people leaving and coming in. And I would go to the extent of saying, because the incubation period or the re-infection after you get an infection is possible after the new sublineages. Anyone who has had a history of traveling to China for the last 30 days should be not allowed to enter till the person is running a negative test and on arrival negative again.
Leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion. It's time for a very short break. Much more coming up on the other side.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.